Yeah, man, Joel's a good dude. I'm glad he's with us. I'm glad he's here with me. I love that guy too. And when Mark Trotter needs something to look nice, Mark Trotter goes to Joel. I guess he's pretty important dude too. You guys know who Mark Trotter is? We talk about him like he's Tom Cruise.
Do you guys know who Tom Cruise is?
Yeah, he's pastor. All right. Okay. Water.
He doesn't drink coffee.
Yeah, I don't like it. Woo. Hallelujah. No coffee. I drink tea. I'm a tea drinker, not a coffee drinker. Not sweet. I don't like sugar, really. You don't like sweet tea? I don't like sweet tea. Sorry to just offend everyone in the room.
Get out.
I know I'm in the South. I drank it.
The dude brought the gospel.
World famous
I don't think he cares about sweet tea.
I drank sweet tea with it. I thought it was the right thing to do. It was. I agree. I'm not do it when I'm down here. I'm an all things to all men kind of guy. So I'll drink sweet tea and I eat whatever's put before me. I've eaten hearts. I've eaten feet. I've eaten all kinds of stuff because that's what the people eat. As long as it's good. We're not here for that. Here's what we're here for. I know for a fact, 100% certain, that God wants to speak to every person in this room this morning.
Amen.
I know that. I know for a fact that God wants to use every person in this room this morning as well. And we saw that on the very first day we were here, that man is uniquely designed to be used by God. You were created with a purpose. Your purpose is to bring worship to Him. Your purpose is to bring glory and honor to Him. And we saw that on the very first night. We saw last night that the Bible is an absolutely deep and incredible book, and you can get lost in the depths of it, and it will blow your mind, and it will give you more than you could ever need. But we also saw that word is truth, and we must cling to truth because our hearts will lie to us. Today's message is going to be a little bit different than the last two nights. It's going to be a lot more simple. All right, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 6. You can go ahead and turn there. And this one is called The Last of the Last. It is, of course, the last message that we will hear while we're here. But that's not the reason that it's called that. You know, in churches like yours and like mine, we talk a lot about the last days, right? We talk a lot about how we are in the end times. And we talk about the idea, and Joel even mentioned it, if we're not absolutely in the end times, here's what we do know, that the Bible tells us our time is short and no one's guaranteed tomorrow. So this could be the last of the last days that you ever live, right? That's the reality. But one thing that maybe we don't always connect the dots. We go, time is short. But what I want to focus on today is that if we are the last of the last days, then that means that you and I are the last of the last Christians. Right? That it is very likely that you could be the very last Christians to ever walk this earth. Have you ever thought about that? It's the last days. Jesus is coming. We say that, but then, okay, what do we do with that? And then, we usually challenge people to live right. But listen, you could be the very last Christians to ever walk this earth. That's a wild thought, isn't it? That is for me. So if we are in the last days, then we are absolutely, without a doubt, the last Christians. And God's desire for your life, and it's been said already, is if you live a supernatural life now, I'm just going to drop that on you right up front. God wants you to live a supernatural life now because the time is short, because you may be the very last one. And the reality of what God tells us in His Word is this, that when you look back, see, one day we will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. We will all stand before Him. And we like to think that that'll be a good thing. But the reality is that for most of us, even for most Christians, that will not be a good day.
No.
The judgment seat of Christ will be a very, very difficult day for most Christians. who have become so consumed with the flesh and so consumed with the things of this world and so given over to being everything that they can be now in the flesh and have totally forgotten that the real me is the me that's in here, that God made me to be eternally, and they didn't put any of their life, any of their time, any of their effort into serving the Lord. And you're going to realize this. When you look back, standing in the face of Jesus at that time, and you look back and realize that you wasted your last days, it will produce terror in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
We think of God as a God of love, and He is, and we think it'll be great to go and meet Him, and sometimes it gets real fluffy when we talk about it. We're going to run and hug, and I see Grandma, I'm going to hug Grandma, and I'm going to hug Jesus. I'm like, Jesus, you're so awesome. You will be scared to death when you stand in front of Him and realize how righteous He is and how much you wasted. Okay? 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 10 and 11. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that every one may receive the things done in his body according to all that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. So you get rewards, good and bad. Therefore, or knowing therefore the terror of the Lord, we persuade men. But we are made manifest unto God, and I trust also are made manifest in their consciences. Paul calls the day that we'll stand before the Lord the terror of the Lord. All right, so that's where that's the basis. Those are just some basic points I wanted to hit you with. We're going to be looking at Noah. I'm going to pray and then we'll do it. All right? God, without your help, we're hopeless. For eternity and for this moment, right here and right now.
Yeah.
And so help us in Jesus' name. Amen. So just a couple thoughts. When you get to Genesis chapter 6 and Noah's life, we are about 1,000 years into human history. We're about 1,000 years removed from Adam now, just a little over 1,000 years. So you've had a millennia already on this earth. And if you think about 1800 to 1900, you think about 1900 to now and the differences in the way the world has changed and grown, you can kind of see that maybe a lot has happened in 1,000 years. But also in that 1,000 years, this is interesting, Noah's father probably knew Adam. They were alive at the same time, even though it's been 1,000 years. Noah's father and Adam were on the earth at the same time. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? Think that my dad would know someone who was born 1,000 years ago? But that's the reality of where we're at in Genesis chapter 6. We're going to read some verses. We're going to start, at the beginning of the chapter it just says that the world is wicked. Everyone is wicked. Verse 5. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And God was really unhappy about that, and it grieved him in his heart, it says in verse 6. Verse 7, and the Lord said, I will destroy man. And he says he's going to bring this great flood. Verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. That's a powerful statement. Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, and you know what God says to Noah, right? The end of all flesh has come before me, and the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. And he tells them how to make the ark. In verse 17, and behold, I, even I, will bring a flood of waters upon the earth and destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. And everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee I will establish my covenant. And so God tells Noah, and it's a pretty familiar Sunday school story, the whole world is going to be flooded and everything is going to die. You're going to build an ark, and then you're going to also get the animals. He mentions that in this chapter, 2 by 2. And you're going to bring them on the ark, and everything that's on the ark will be saved, and everything that's not found in the ark will be destroyed. And everything that breathes will die. Right? You guys know that story, right? All right. So that's the foundation, that's the basis of where we're at today. And a couple things I want to tell you up front. It says, first of all, that Noah found grace. The context is the destroying of the whole world. God's going to destroy all of mankind, he says, but then there's Noah. And Noah found grace. in the eyes of the Lord. And Noah for us is a picture of a Christian. Noah is a type of a lost man who finds Christ. Because Noah was just, going about his life, and then God intervened in his life. And that's what it is to be a Christian. That's what Joel was telling you about. Even growing up in a Christian home, I was just a lost man, a lost boy wandering around until God intervened in my life. Noah becomes a picture for us of the grace of God and what God will do with all the Christians. One day the Lord will return and destroy the earth. But the Christians, you who already know him, have found grace in his sight. And I know for sure that there are some sitting here today who have not yet tasted, not yet experienced, not yet received that grace. And we're praying for you. So Noah is a type of Christian, and the ark is like a picture of salvation. It's like a picture of Jesus Christ. It's a picture of coming into him and letting him protect you from the destruction that is yet to come. It says that Noah was a just man. So he wasn't a Christian because there weren't any back then, but he was seeking after God. He just wanted to live a right life before the Lord. And it also says this about Noah. It says that he was perfect in his generations. And we talked a little bit last night about what that meant, and that all of flesh was corrupted because the sons of God and the daughters of men produced some giants. But Noah's just, and he's perfect in his generations. And what that means is that his lineage, his family line is pure and clean. Now here's an important point. That mattered at the time of Noah, but it has no impact. It matters not at all today in our lives here. You may come from any kind of background. You can have any kind of family life, any kind of circumstances, and that does not matter. Okay? Where you came from in your past does not matter to God. But what you do with your life now does. You may say, my family's a mess. That's okay. It does not matter to God. My dad hates me. My mom left the house when I was 12. Okay? That's hard, but listen. It doesn't exclude you from the grace of God in any way whatsoever. But I'm a bad person. I've made a lot of really bad choices in the past. I'm a mess. I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm doing a lot of stuff. Listen, God's grace is greater than all of that. None of that matters when you decide that today I'm going to follow after the Lord. And so Noah walked with God, it says, and Noah built an ark. Noah had a particular character about him, a particular attitude about him. And so living a life that matters in the last days requires 5 things that I want to give you right now. Just 5 things for us to think about. As young men and young women. Number 1, living a life that matters in the last days will require choosing to stand alone. God brought a message to Noah, and he was the only one who got that message. And then he had a hard choice to make. Am I going to stand for that message or not? And he looked around, and originally, from the jump, he's like, well, there's nobody here but me. It's just me and God delivered a message, and that's what we pray that God is doing this weekend with you. God is delivering a message. I know God has been speaking, and some of you have heard the message, but then you're going, but I don't have any other Christians in my school with me. Nobody from my church goes to school with me. On my football team, they're all lost. My whatever your sport is, everyone I know. And if I'm going to follow Christ, what you're realizing is you're going to have to do it alone. Noah did too. I did too. I went to a high school that had about 3,000 students. And when I was a freshman and sophomore in high school, God was really convicting me that they needed to have a Bible study in that school. And I didn't have anyone from my church that went to school with me. It was just me. And God kept saying, hey, you going to tell these people you're going to start a Bible study? And in my sophomore year, I said, God, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be faithful to what you've called. And I went and started a Bible study. I found a Christian teacher who was also a science teacher, not a Christian scientist, right? Because he was a Christian man who taught science. And he couldn't let us use his room, but in the back of the room, he had this closet where they kept all the science equipment. And he's like, you can just meet in the closet and have Bible study. And then it started with me and one other guy, just one friend of mine who was a Christian and went to another church, and we started meeting together. We go in the closet, and like the beakers and the scales are there, and then on the other side it's like jars of formaldehyde, and there's like snakes and frogs and all kinds of stuff. And we just started studying the Bible together because that's what God called me to do. And it required me starting alone. And starting with one other guy. And Noah had the same thing, the same reality in his life, and so many of you. But listen, to live a life that matters and to live a life that's supernatural, oftentimes it requires you starting alone. And that's a hard choice to make, but you can make it today in the comfort of a group, and then you get that group around you and say, none of these people go to my school, but hey, they can pray for you. They can encourage you. You can text each other. You can jump on WhatsApp and say, hey brother, it's Monday. Are you doing that Bible study today? I'm doing it. I'm going to go. You can do that prayer group today. We do the same thing with our college group. Joel and Brock are both involved in Bible studies, and we have a lot of guys that are reaching out on campuses, and I know some of you guys are getting on a college campus and trying to start Bible studies, and you walk in there alone and you go, what on earth am I doing? What you're doing is living a supernatural life. And so that's where it began for Noah. He had to make a stand. He had to decide, I'm alone, but I'm going to follow God, and God's worth being alone with. Because the truth is, when you're with God, you're never actually really alone. Because He's always there, and He's always with you. Number 2, if you're going to live a life that really matters, a supernatural life, it will require you choosing to work hard when others are relaxing. Build an ark. That's a big job. How many of you are experienced ark builders in this room? Do we have any? Me either. And when you start to look at the dimensions of that thing, it was massive. It's like the size of a football field and 3 stories high, and it's giant. There's some ark experience down in this part of the country, isn't there? Isn't that down here in the south somewhere? Anybody seen that thing? You been to it? Is it big? It's huge, isn't it? It's like way bigger than this room. Can you build that for us? Do you think it'd be a lot of work to get that thing put together? Yeah. And look, this is the reality of life with Christ, is that there will come times where you have to make a decision to say, I'm going to work hard, and you're going to go, but it's not fair, because my friends get to play video games now, because my friends get to relax, because everybody else gets to take it easy, and the majority of the world will do that. They will be relaxing. And you're going to go, I want to follow God, and God's going to say, it does require a bit of hard work. I don't want to wake up early and read the Bible. I want to sleep in. I don't want to go to bed early at night so that I can wake up early and read the Bible. I want to play video games. But I want to follow God more than that. I had to make those decisions too. I had to decide, you know what? I got to stay home tonight. I don't get to go to this event. I don't get to do some things. I had to sacrifice some of the fun that I wanted to have in order to say, I've got this Bible study I'm committed to. I've got to be prepared to teach people tomorrow. So I got to do some hard work. And that's the reality of a Christian who's living in the very last days. And that's the reality of a Christian who's going to be the very last Christian to walk this earth. That if people out there are going to hear the truth, it will require you to say, no matter what, I got to change my attitude. I got to get a little bit of grit. I got to get a little bit of determination. I got to get a little bit of don't quit in me. Because the work is going to be tough. Generally speaking, when we're in high school, we don't like hard work. Generally speaking, because old people always say this, you young kids, you don't know nothing about hard work. Joel said he's young, but I'm not. I'm the old dude. I'm a lot older than Joel. Listen. But it's a reality, man. It's tough. But we also need in terms of the hard work, we need to get this mindset also. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 20 and 21, God is telling Moses to do a couple really crazy things. One is build an ark. That's an impossible thing. The second one is get all of the animals 2 by 2 onto the ark. And you go, how do I do that? How do I round up animals? Go out there and catch 2 of every one of them. Right? Male and female. I caught a rabbit. Boy. Caught another rabbit. Still boys. Where do I find female rabbits? Come here. Come here, rabbit. Are you a girl or a boy? You got to get them on that ark. These are impossible things. But listen, along with an attitude that says I'm going to work hard, you also have to get this attitude. Nothing is impossible. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to trust God that He's going to do the rest of it. That God's going to make it happen. When you really believe that nothing is impossible, then you are encouraged to start working hard because you want to see the supernatural happen. On Thursday, camp was impossible. On Friday morning, this retreat was still impossible. But we had a mindset, I believed in my heart, that nothing is impossible. So God's going to do it. What's it going to require? Some hard work from Thomas, some hard work from Chris, some hard time praying and fasting from us, but nothing is impossible. Also, along with a hard-working attitude, it will require you to take a mindset that says details matter. Build the ark, God said, and then he gave them all these details about how to do it, what kind of wood and how big and doors and windows and where to put them and how to seal it up and all of that stuff. You may have to start caring just a little bit more about some of the details of life. As I started leading a Bible study, I had no idea the things that I was going to have to start thinking about. I got to start thinking about, how do I invite people? That's a detail. How do we design flyers? How do we make, how do we play games? Like all these little things. The details all of a sudden belong to me, and I had to say, hey, well then they're an important thing. Then they have to be an important part of my life too. We like it when we're young to say, I'm just going to show up and go along for the ride. But hard work is a part of living a life that really matters, of being the last of the last. Number 3, being the last of the last, it will require us to have this mindset that trading temporary pain for long-term peace. We are going to be willing to suffer a little bit as well. Because being the last of the last and going and telling the world about Jesus Christ is hard. It's an alone work. It's a hard work. And it's one that will require a little bit of suffering. People are going to make fun of you. I know. And I know you guys are going to think this is really hard to believe. Because when you see me, you're like, that guy's so cool. He's like cooler than Brad Pitt. He's like cooler than Iron Man. He's kind of like a superhero and all that. But listen, people make fun of me. Shock. I know, it's hard to believe it. But it's the reality. And it hurts. It does. It hurts to be on the outside. It hurts to not fit in, right? It hurts to suffer through some of those things. But listen, I survived it. And when I look back on it, I can see all the peace that God brought into it. And I know that peace is long-lasting.
Yeah.
The pains that you're experiencing now, the heartaches and the hurts, they are temporary. They do not last forever. But to have a life that's worth anything, to have a life that is going to impact eternity, and to say, look, I'm the last Christian that walks this earth, and just like Noah, everybody out there is going to drown in a flood. Everybody out there is going to die. I got to build an ark. I got to haul wood. I got to cut it. I got to put it together. I got to sacrifice some sleep. It's going to hurt a little bit. But think about the day that the door shut on the ark and the rain started to fall.
Yeah.
Who had peace? Noah had peace. And that peace lasted. And what about everybody else? Did they have peace? As that water started getting deeper and deeper, how much peace was found without that ark? My dad was a dairy farmer. Oh, let me tell you this. There's a blank. Long-term peace only comes through great sacrifice in the short term. So peace comes through sacrifice. My dad was a dairy farmer growing up. And that meant he had to get up at 5 o'clock and milk cows every day. Even from the time he was probably like 8 years old. He's out there milking cows. They probably had machines. But that's hard work. And then he had to bale hay. Then he had to go to school. Then he had to come home after school to do the second milking. So he's back at that, right? And so there's just some hard work if you're a farmer. That's just part of the life. And it required a lot of sacrifice and some pain. He tells a story about how when he got into high school, he was a freshman. This may surprise you, but he's not a very big guy. You might have guessed that, judging by me. I'm a grown man. But there's junior high girls here that are just bigger than me. That's not an insult on you. That's really an insult on me. All right? You're normal. I'm not. And I'm bigger than my father. So, good news is we're not Nephilim. We're not the giants. So that's good. Anyway, One day after school, before he went home, the wrestling team was practicing. It was wrestling season. They're like, "Hey, Doug," that's my dad's name. "Hey, Doug, come wrestle with us." And so he's like, "All right, I got a couple minutes," kind of like you all were doing yesterday. And he goes in there and he just starts beating all the wrestlers, all these trained wrestlers, just because he's been living a hard-working life and he's just strong naturally. And he's throwing these wrestlers down and pinning them. And they're like, "Doug, you need to get on the wrestling team." He's like, "Sorry, I can't. I got to get home to milk some cows. My dad's going to beat me because he's stronger than me." And so my dad had to go home. He had to make some of these sacrifices. And that's, a silly story, but that same thing is true spiritually.
Yeah.
It's tough to give up friends like Joel talked about. It's tough to end a relationship. It's painful. I did it too. But there's great peace that comes with it. There is great peace that comes with it. Here's another story about my dad just being a farmer. Have you seen those pegboards, when you have the sticks and you climb up them? The army had come to his high school to recruit kids, and they have one of these pegboards, and they're like, "If you can climb to the top, we'll give you a free T-shirt or something, and then you'll be in the Marines." And so, kids would try it and fall off, but my dad had a big tall silo, 100-foot silo. And he said whenever he would have to go up the silo, he would do it without his feet. He would just do the rungs hand over hand. So he was used to that kind of stuff. So he went over there and he got on the pegboard and went all the way to the top. And then he just left the pegs there and used his fingers in the holes to come back down. And then the army guys are like, "Can you go back up there and get those?" He's like, "No, I gotta go milk the cows. I'm out of here." Get down, sticks. I don't know what they did. Hey, pain makes you tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Hard work makes you strong. And there's an advantage to that. Number 4. If you're living a life that matters, if you're going to be a Christian who is the last of the last, and listen, you have to choose to preach a message that nobody will respond to. Moses built that ark. Moses preached for decades. Maybe we overlook the timeline in Genesis 6 where you're like, God says build an ark, then it starts raining. That's kind of how the story goes. We're talking about 50, 70, 100 years. This guy was at work for 100 years, potentially. This was a long project. And while he's building the ark, he's preaching. How many people got on the ark with him? His family. 6 others. He started alone. He gained very few in the whole process. He got his kids and their wives, and that was it. But he had to preach that message to everyone he came in contact with, and nobody responded. You know how many times I've shared the gospel and nobody has responded? You know how many times I've tried to start Bible studies and nobody has responded? And that too is disappointing and disheartening, and you go, God, I'm following you, and God, I want to, and I'm sharing your word, and I'm talking to people, but nobody seems to care. God, why is it that nobody wants to hear what you have to say? That'll be the reality. That doesn't change what God's called us to do. God's called us to be obedient and to bring worship to his name, which means what? I have to preach a message that more than likely nobody cares to hear. What if they don't care to hear? Jeremiah preached a message for years and years and years that nobody wanted to respond to, and nobody responded to. God is good. I started a Bible study in my high school. I was really crazy. I have this wide margin. I had the same Bible when I was in high school. I used to carry it around school. Like, not a pocket Bible. It was this exact Bible. I was like walking around school with this. I was that kid. Me and my couple buddies, the Bible study started to grow. We started in the closet, and eventually we outgrew the closet, and the teacher talked to the principal, and he opened up his room to us, and in the science room, like every desk was full, and by the end of our junior year, there were 40 and 50 kids showing up for Bible study. They're sitting on the heaters that line the walls, and they're standing in the corners, and then the Bible study, we split it, and 2 other Bible studies started, and God started doing cool stuff. People didn't listen, but there was a time where you go, nobody cares and nobody's listening. And that's hard. And serving God doesn't always result in a great following. It doesn't always result in great praise for you. It doesn't always result in great things to happen from you. But listen, are you willing to continue when nobody will continue with you? Are you willing to not only start alone, but say, God, I'm willing even to finish this job alone if I have to? Because you are the last Christians potentially to ever walk this earth. And when we're out of here, it's just like in the days of Noah. Judgment is coming. Every person that you know in your school and on your teams and in your life who have not gotten into that ark, who have not put their faith in Jesus Christ, the same thing will happen to them that happened to those people outside the ark. They will die without hope. Number 5. Last thing. If I'm going to be the last Christian on this earth, what kind of attitude does it require? It requires us choosing to get in an ark when everyone else thinks you're crazy. Because the message that we preach now is not welcome. It's not well received. If you tell people you're a Christian and you tell people the things that you believe and you stand for, they will tell you you are a crazy person. You have lost your mind. They'll say things like, science doesn't support you. Our society doesn't support you. Our government doesn't support you. They'll say even crazier things like, morals don't support you. And you go, wait, God needs to decide that. And you go, nope. In our society, we decide. And at the end of building that ark, and Noah realized that nobody but his family is getting on with him. And then he had a really hard choice to make. Am I still going to get in this ark anyway? Because everyone thinks I'm crazy. Maybe I am. Maybe I just shouldn't get in the ark. He got in the ark. Everyone else thought he was crazy. The truth is, as we get to the end, there will be fewer and fewer like us. More and more people will think you're crazy. You tell someone you believe in creation and not evolution, you're a crazy person. You tell someone that you believe that God made male and female and they are distinct, you're a crazy person. You tell people that you believe that you should stay how God made you, you should be who God made you to be, you're a crazy person now. You tell people you believe that there is one truth, one way, one truth, one life. You tell people that there's only one way to heaven, you're a crazy person in the eyes of this world. You know, when God was calling me to Pakistan, that's the thing that I probably heard the most. People would go, James, you are a crazy person. Why are you going there? I'm a nurse, I had a good job, right? And the doctors I worked with, they say, James, you just stay here. You're a good nurse, you have a good job, you're serving people, you're helping people here, you make good money, we like you. Why would you go to Pakistan? That's crazy. Christians would say that. Christians would say, you guys are crazy. Have you heard about Pakistan? We saw it on the news. They're like, we watched Zero Dark 30 or any other movie you want. They kill people there. That's a crazy place to be. And people kept telling us that. They go, James, you're crazy. And here's what I told them. I know, but this is what God is calling me to do.
Amen.
And if I don't obey God, then I am the crazy one.
Yeah.
If I don't obey God, then I am the one who has to face the judgment myself. I have to obey God. Call me crazy. I'm going with God.
Good word.
Going with God's going to put you in the minority and from a political and social standpoint on the wrong side of a lot of positions. But you'll still be on God's side. And so that's it. That's a simple word for today. You are the very last, potentially very last Christians to walk this earth. What the Bible tells us is that the Lord God is returning at any minute. That a trump will sound, and those of us who have been saved, those of us who are truly Christians, those of us who have put our faith in Him, will be taken out of here. And that is the exact same reality as when the door to the ark closed. God shut it and sealed it. Nobody else is getting in. That's the end. and judgment will come. So God is calling you to live a supernatural life now, just as Noah did. And listen, a life that is lived in the presence of God will result in supernatural outcomes. It will. I've already said it, but I'm saying it again. A life that is lived in the presence of God will result in supernatural outcomes. You will see the supernatural happen in your life. We saw it on Friday as we prayed and labored over this. This is a supernatural thing that you're doing. You take that attitude, you take those 5 attitudes into your school, you will see supernatural things happen. I got another friend who came with me. His name's Brock. He's been hiding up in the sound booth, doing AV for us. He's been making sure that this stuff looks good. He's been making sure that the band sounds good. He's been making sure that I sound good, that you guys can hear us without yelling. He's been a huge blessing to this camp, right? Actually, Joel made this. Joel's a designer. Yeah. Joel did that work. Anything that looks good or sounds good around me is not been produced by me. I can tell you that. I have none of those talents and abilities. But Brock's, you guys need to see his face. I know some of you have seen him in Gaga Ball, smashing you because he's like the king. But you need to hear his testimony real quickly also, all right? Brock's going to tell you a little bit about his life. Brock. Yeah.
Thank you guys. It's been a pleasure to meet you guys. I feel like we're too close to the monitor. I feel like I know you guys already, and I met you guys 48 hours ago, some of you. But that's just family. That's what the body of Christ is family. So I've been in Kansas City, but I know who you guys are led by, and I know what words you read, and I know what messages you hear. It's the same thing we're hearing. Pastor Thomas is my pastor, but man, we're family, and I listen to him while I'm here, and James preaches messages similar to this, and I'm just so thankful for guys like James and Pastor Thomas and the guys that have hosted me, man. I'm so thankful for you guys. A little bit about myself. I'm Brock. I'm 25 years old. I came to faith a few years ago, but I spent a long time trying to figure out who God was. So I'm the opposite of Joel. My family doesn't go to church. I'm the youngest of 8 kids, okay? Yeah, I know. And my oldest sister is saved, and that's it. It's me and my oldest sister. My parents probably are saved. It's a long story, but when I was growing up, we never went to church. I didn't actually even hear the gospel fully until I was about 12 years old. So how many of you are 12 or older right now? Raise your hand. Okay, so you can put them down now. The ones that didn't raise their hand, I had not heard the gospel yet. Okay, so for me, I had no hope at all. The Bible is very clear that there's no hope outside of Jesus Christ. And so for me, when I was 12 years old, a friend of mine, he said, hey, why don't you come to church with me? And so I did. And my pastor, at the time, he preached the gospel to me, but all I heard is that I was going to hell. And so I went forward, and when the invitation came forward, and he said, if you just pray this prayer, you'll go to heaven. And I was like, that's it? Okay, cool. And so I did that thing. I repeated the words that he told me to repeat. And then there was no reality of it in my life. I said these words, and now I've got this ticket to heaven or whatever, and I'm good. And I was like, is that it? Is that what I'm supposed to do? Am I just supposed to be yoinked up by God one day and I'm over? And so I started following men that I thought knew the Bible and knew God. And we moved around a couple times after that, and so I didn't really get to be invested in by anyone. And I had good men who loved Jesus Christ, who didn't understand his word fully. If you don't know, you get premium preaching here. Not that these men are special necessarily, but these men love the word of God. And they come up here and they hold this Bible in their hand and they say, thus saith the Lord. And that doesn't happen very many places. And so the men that do, man, be grateful for them. I'm serious. So anyways, when I was 12 years old, I make this profession of faith, and then there's no reality of anything in my life until, you remember that guy that James was talking about yesterday? He's 6 foot, 14 inches, Adam Merritt. Funny story, James actually disciples that guy. And James leaves for Pakistan, and I come into the very hospital that James just left from, and Adam Merritt says, "Hey man, you want to come to church with me?" And I come to church, and I meet my pastor, Brandon Briscoe, and for 2 years, Brandon Briscoe and Adam Merritt and other men in that Bible study, they invest in me, and they love on me, and they start preaching the Word of God to me. And I was in Paramexco at the time, and it was consuming my life, and it was my life. And so I was in and out, and I left for like a period of 9 months because life got too busy. And then one day I got a text from Brandon, and he says, "Hey, let's have coffee." And I remember I'm sitting in a coffee shop with Brandon Briscoe, who is my pastor, who is my friend. And he says, "Brock, if you want to take this seriously, if you really want to follow the Lord, you need to count the cost. You need to come and you need to get discipled. You need to let men invest the Word of God into you." And that was so amazing to my soul, just to hear those words. And so as we go on, and I get there, I remember July 23rd, 2017, I'm sitting in Cost of Discipleship. And my good friend Miles, he's preaching the gospel, and it's the same verses I've heard 1,000 times. But they were different. I couldn't sit in my seat. I was so nervous, I didn't know what to do. And so I pulled Brandon aside, and we started talking. "Jack, can you bring that chair up to me real quick, that spare chair?" And I remember just being like, wow, why is this so different? Thank you. And so Brandon's explaining this to me, and I realized something. I knew Jesus Christ in knowledge, but I never knew Jesus Christ in my heart. I knew the verses, man, but I never once truly believed who Jesus Christ was. Okay? So I'll explain it like this. If I'm looking at this chair, and I'm like, "Hey, this is a really nice chair," you guys are like, "Okay, that's cool." And I'm like, no, that's a really great chair. And you're like, "Yeah, I get it." And I just sit here and talk about this chair for like 15 minutes. You're like, "Okay, I get it." But until the moment that I take this chair and I say, "I bet this chair can hold me," and then I stand here like this, you're not going to believe that I actually believe that this chair will hold me. And for 10 years of my life, I sat there and said, "Jesus Christ, he's cool. Yeah, he's the Son of God." The Bible says that the demons even believe in God, and they shudder. The moment in time where I got saved is when I said, "Yeah, this chair will hold me." And then I sat there, and I actually believed on Jesus Christ. I no longer just said Jesus Christ was the Son of God. I actually put my entire faith in Jesus Christ. And so if you're here today and that's your testimony, please don't leave. Talk to someone. There's leaders here that want to talk to you. There's a quick verse that God reminded me of. So, follow up to that story. I got discipled by a guy named Jorge. He's a great friend of mine. I'm discipling a guy now named Will. We're almost done, so pray for us. But it does get better. The men taught me the Bible. I continued on in the faith. I continued on learning the Bible. And now I get to teach others also, which is probably the greatest thing ever. So the Bible tells me in Colossians 1:12 that I was translated from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of his dear Son. But that wasn't the end. That was literally the beginning. That's why God didn't rapture me up the moment I got saved. And so my admonition to you guys is, please, if you're not saved, talk to somebody about that. But if you are saved, continue on. Let's get trained up, and let's walk with God like Noah did, and let's teach others also, like I have the privilege to do, like so many here have the privilege to do. The verse I want to share with you real quick is Mark chapter 5. It's the woman talking to Jesus when she touches the hem of his garment. So it says in verse 25 in Mark chapter 5, "And a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things and many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing better, but rather grew worse." Verse 27, "When she had heard of Jesus, came in to press behind, and touched his garment." So there's a crowd around. I should have mentioned that in the context. There's a crowd around them, and they can't even get in. And that's what the word press means. The press is there. And she sneaks in there, and she touches his garment. And what she says next has forever changed my life. Hold my Bible right, there we go. For she said, if I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. Man, what kind of faith is that? And then she goes on and she says, and it says, and straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. Man, for 12 years, I did not touch the hem of that garment, and I was never once healed of that plague. And then here's what it says, and Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, who touched my clothes? Verse 31, and his disciples said unto him, thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and sayest thou, who touched me? The disciples are like, why are you doing that? We're in the middle of a crowd. Who cares? Jesus does. Verse 32, and he looked round about to see her, that he had done nothing, that had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done to her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. Man, that gets to me because faith is the only thing that can make us whole. So if you're here today, Thomas is getting ready to come up and he's gonna give us a little charge. But if you're here today and that's your testimony, I sat where you guys sat for years, and I raised my hand and I said, I'm happy, and it was fake. And I spent years just standing there pretending I had joy. And if you would just touch the hem, if you would just believe that Jesus Christ, who is the Son of God, can make you whole, and he'll do it in like that. 12 years this woman looked for the world, the doctors, everything. Nothing happens. 10 seconds with Jesus and a little bit of faith, and man, she's made whole. And I beg you today, with all that I have, please do the same. Thank you guys so much.